What's up, heathens? How ya doing? Today we're going to be taking a look at this clip of Frank Turek.
There's probably a number of reasons that people believe in macroevolution. They've been taught it. It's the best explanation from a naturalistic perspective we have, even though it's got a lot of holes in it. And also, it's based on a worldview that miracles don't occur. They're presupposing that God doesn't exist. It's not science that's telling us this, it's scientists, and they may have it wrong.
Yes, so Frank doesn't know how scientists actually do work in the lab. He wants to paint us as all presupposing that God doesn't exist or something like that. He totally negates an entire section of the scientific community. But regardless of that, we are going to be taking a look at Frank Turek and his bullshit here today. If you're interested in knowing how much bullshit Frank Turek is slinging here, then please stay tuned.
If scientists, scholars and whatnot, if they're so smart and they really want the truth, why are they so married to evolution when there are so many, strong arguments that go against it? Why do they reject it?
Thank you for your question, Karen. You see, scientists aren't married to the idea of evolution as if they're somehow beholden to it. Scientists just follow the evidence where it goes, and they are indeed on a search for truth. I'm wondering what particular piece of evidence you have that debunks evolution that scientists already haven't either considered or debunked themselves. Because most scientists, at least in the biological evolution field, they've looked at all of the creationist claims and have come away thinking that they're all bullshit. And most creationist claims, most intelligent design claims, are based on twisting scientific facts around in order to support them when the scientific facts really don't. So I'm wondering, what are your reasons that you think scientists shouldn't support evolution, which is where you should be led if you're honestly looking at the evidence?
Well, there's probably a number of reasons that people believe in macroevolution. They've been taught it. It's the best explanation from a naturalistic perspective we have, even though it's got a lot of holes in it.
It doesn't have any holes. What holes are you talking about here? Are you talking about like abiogenesis? Because that doesn't affect evolution whatsoever. Evolution still would have happened even if God Thanos snapped life into existence. Like the very bare minimum amount of life into existence. Evolution would have taken place after that point. Now, macroevolution is a creationist term that was made up by them in order to distinguish what they call microevolution. That would be the adaptation, which is still evolution. Adaptation over long periods of time is just evolution. But they want to nitpick it so that it works for their worldview. And what Frank Turek is about to do is he's about to really put a lot on the scientific community. He's about to try to, strawman the scientific community as being more dogmatic than they actually are. When, in fact, Frank and his religion are the dogmatic players in this particular conversation.
And also, it's based on a worldview that miracles don't occur.
Oh, well, fuck scientists for thinking that miracles don't happen, even though there's no way to actually verify that miracles are a thing. There's been no verified miracles in the past. Every time we've looked at miracles, we've come away with natural processes that explain it. Like, for instance, there was this crying statue somewhere in India. Everybody was going crazy over it, right? And so they would collect her tears. They would even drink it, rub it on their skin, and all that other shit. Turns out that it actually came from a shitter. So it's kind of funny when you say that, oh, they don't believe in miracles. When, if you, in that situation, if you were just to believe, oh my God, God is so amazing, He is making this statue cry, we should collect the tears and we should sell it for high prices. And we shouldn't look further because, God, this is a miracle. obviously. I mean, they were drinking shit water from a goddamn toilet. The God question, like God, the explanation of God would have them stop at, there's a statue crying. But no, upon further investigation, we found out something that you wouldn't want to drink. So it seems to me like miracles, all this supernatural shit, none of it has been proven to actually be a thing. So until you can present some kind of scientific evidence of the supernatural, which you can't, because that's what it means to be supernatural, is that it's above nature. It doesn't exist in reality. You see, once something supernatural can be explained in reality, then it is no longer supernatural. So until you can provide some kind of scientific evidence, which is the only kind of evidence that can explain anything that happens in our reality, until you can provide that for supernatural shit, then yes, the scientists are correct in dismissing all miracle and supernatural claims.
They're presupposing that God doesn't exist. And they have to operate that way when they go into the laboratory, they think. They have to have this, what's called methodological naturalism. That they have, their method when they do science presupposes that there's no intelligence out there.
I would say that the God question in the science lab should really not play a factor because of the fact that science is looking to describe things in reality, in natural terms. It's not looking to supernaturally describe anything. If you're going into the lab looking for God, then it is going to prevent you from making scientific discoveries. Because as soon as you encounter something that you can't explain immediately, then God did it, and it's this giant fucking God stop sign that's placed right in front of you. And so you're just fine with stopping at the God stop sign. But you see, what Frank is doing here is he's alienating the theistic scientist community out there. Let's just assume, that there's a hefty amount of religious scientists out there. Frank, regardless of the number of religious scientists, Frank is alienating those people because he's saying, no, because you're a scientist and you're not looking for God in the laboratory, that means that you presuppose that God doesn't exist. No, these people think that God exists. They totally believe that God exists. But when they go into the lab, they do not consider God as a viable explanation because God doesn't explain anything. It's a faith-based position, not a scientific position. And they shouldn't be looking for God in there because, like I just said, God is a stop sign in the laboratory.
Okay? And so when they're looking for a cause, they're always going to assume it's a natural cause, even if the evidence points to an intelligent being.
What evidence points to an intelligent being? Please tell me. Any time in the past that we've had something that's been explained by God, we've been able to explain it with natural processes. So are you shitting on the whole idea that now we know like how weather works or how diseases work? Because at one point in time, those were all left up to God and God's will. If we had thought that God was the answer for those particular things, we wouldn't have tried to figure out the natural processes behind them. So are you trying to say that we don't need to go to the laboratory and we don't need to look for natural processes or natural causes for certain things and we just need to label everything as God? At what point do you stop looking for natural processes and you start seeing God? Because it seems to me at every point in the past, every time we've met that barrier, we've met that stop sign, it's always taken somebody that's like, fuck this stop sign, then they proceed past it and they find natural processes, and then that stop sign moves. That stop sign moves to the next point that we can't seem to explain right then. So I don't understand why this God explanation is so coveted by you. I mean, I get that it's a faith-based position for you, that, there are some things in this world that you have to attribute to God, like the origin of life. But I want to know, what evidence do you think has shown itself in the laboratory or anywhere that would give us an indication of God or some designer? Has there been evidence so far? And what would that evidence look like? Would it just be something that we can't explain? Because it seems like, just how I laid out, the past would dictate that we would eventually find a natural process that would explain that. So it seems like the most logical position is to go into the laboratory and not have a concept of God, as far as it being an explanation for anything that you would want to find in reality.
So it's more of a philosophical presupposition than it is based on interpreting the evidence properly. And in the book Stealing from God, we have a chapter on science. The title of the chapter is Science Doesn't Say Anything. Scientists do.
Well, true, but when science is done properly by scientists, generally you're going to want to isolate variables and you're going to come away with a very definite answer. And most times, depending on the individual, most times that explanation is not going to be God. Like, of course, when a creationist goes into a lab and he encounters something that he doesn't understand, can't find any information on, he's of course going to be like, oh, look, shit, God. What I'm talking about is scientists that are actually wanting to find the truth about reality. They're not going to come to the conclusion of God. And true, science doesn't make statements. Science is a methodology for figuring out and describing our reality. That's all science is. It is up to the scientist to be able to interpret the data, but if you're doing science properly, you've isolated variables so that you can definitely prove a connection between two things, or you can definitely prove that this process is causing this other thing to happen. So it seems to me like God only exists in the gaps of our knowledge. And you're a complete example of this, Frank, because that's all that you're laying out here in this video, is a God of the gaps idea. Because we've been able to figure out all these natural processes to explain all of these gaps in the past, and there's only a few gaps in our knowledge now, which you're attributing to evolution, and saying that scientists are dogmatic whenever they go into the laboratory. But that's not actually true. Scientists are not dogmatic, especially about evolution.
You see, all data needs to be gathered, all data needs to be interpreted, and that's what scientists do, not science. And that's why when you hear somebody on TV saying, science says we have, no, science doesn't say a word. Scientists, I just saw a headline today, it said something like, I don't care whether you think global climate change is true or not, that's not my point. But the point is, it said, we have 12 years before we're going to, if we don't do something about climate change, before the end. Doomsday, right?
Okay, before you get to your answer for the global climate change thing, for one, global climate change is a thing that's going on. Humans are making it worse. I have a video here on my channel where I respond to a Clear Energy Alliance about hurricanes, and it's really funny because I put that out right before the hurricane season when the Dorian and others started popping up. So it's not really funny, but the fact that those storms were like massive and horrible just confirms that, what the science says about hurricanes and climate change is correct. I think Frank is taking the whole science says this a little too literally here, because it's not that science is saying anything, but it's the scientific evidence that indicates these things. And true, scientists are communicating this, but if they've done their studies appropriately and everything like that, then the scientific evidence that points to a certain answer is going to be indicating what the scientists are telling you it indicates. And if you look at the actual evidence, you will find that it actually does indicate those things. All right. Now, Frank, get back to your whole climate change thing.
Well, people said that stuff in the 1970s, and then in the 1980s, and then in the 1990s, and then in the 2000s. They keep saying, we got 10 years, 12 years, and here we still are, right? It's not science that's telling us this, it's scientists, and they may have it wrong.
Yes, scientists may have some stuff wrong. And that is the best thing about science, is that it's okay to be wrong about something. If we get more information about something, and then we redo experiments or we perform new experiments that give us more information about something, science has a mechanism to where it can change the already established knowledge base. Is there anything like that for Christianity or intelligent design or creationism? There's not. There's nothing like that comparable in creationism, because creationism is dogmatic. Intelligent design is dogmatic. God created the entire universe. God created all the life here on earth. God laid it all down at once. God flooded the earth. These are things that they will unequivocally say are factual and have happened in reality. And there's nothing that you can do, say, or prove, no observation to make them think otherwise. Doesn't that make science just look a lot better? Because if I can sufficiently prove to a scientist that they are wrong about a certain topic or subject, then they will relook at the information and they will change their minds, because they're not dogmatically held to their position. They're not faithfully holding that position. But with intelligent design, creationism, religion in general, that is a faith-based position where you're putting all of your faith into what these people said back in like the BC era and the AD, first century AD. You're putting all of your faith into that with no actual evidence to support their claims. And with all of the scientific evidence, all of the observable evidence, the experimental evidence, everything that we can actually test for goes against that faith-based dogmatic position. And you can't change their minds. So it's a great thing that science admits that it can get things wrong and that it has a mechanism to change the already existing knowledge base so that we can maintain an updated knowledge about reality. And we can have the best description of reality that we can possibly have at that moment in time. See, that's a positive to me, but Frank paints it as a negative. Of course people can be wrong, but Frank, your book is a lot more wrong than you want to admit it is. Thank you, heathens, for joining us today, for taking a look at Frank Turek here. If you will, please go down below, leave me your thoughts about what Frank has said. Do you think that he's alienating the theistic scientist community out there? Do you think that he's spitting a whole bunch of bullshit on evolution? Let me know what you think down in the comments. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to check out these links over here, and also stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.